Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Elliot Ruga. I'm the Policy and Communications Director at the New Jersey Highlands Coalition, and I am joined by my partners, the Delaware River Keeper Network and Citizens for Sustainable Development, to explain the Jaindl warehouse property in the context of the regulation that it is seeking approval for to construct what's known as the White 519 Commerce Center, and they are seeking a to amend the Upper Delaware Water Quality Management Plan, which is required in order for them to establish new sewer service area for a discharge to groundwater. And we're here to discuss the water quality management planning rules, what it takes to meet the regulatory requirements, where this application may have some weaknesses. And if you choose to comment as a citizen, and we hope you do, to either to submit written comments and to also testify at the August 5th non-adversarial hearing, which is at 10 a.m. and it's a virtual hearing, and we'll explain how to access that. Uh, what we'd like to do is to be able to explain the regulations and the application so you can submit informed comments if you wish to, and we hope that you do. Important part of tonight is a Q&A that will follow a series of presentations. If you have questions, please hold off until the end when we have the Q&A. And to ask a question, you can either use the raise your hand feature, or you can type a question in the Q&A box, which you can access at the bottom of your screen. After my introduction and discussion of New Jersey's water quality management planning rules, I'll turn it over to Tom Boldowski. Tom is one of the founding members of Citizens for Sustainable Development. Tom is also a professional engineer, so his insights as both a local resident plus an engineer. Tom's insights will help explain some of the major concerns we have about this project. After Tom, Jeff Gohl will talk about the site's hydrology and karst, or limestone bedrock, which has certain considerations, some very important ones, particularly in regard to handling of stormwater. And then Mike Sikovich from the law firm of Lieberman, Blechter, and Sikovich will talk about the legal aspects of the regulation. And then Chris Amato, also from CFSD, who works with Lehigh Valley Regional Planning Commission, will talk about a regional view on warehouses and what has happened in Pennsylvania on the other side of the Delaware with the great proliferation of warehouses, how that has impacted the quality of life, flooding, traffic, and other considerations there. And then Butch Van Setters, also from CFSD, will talk about wildlife impacts by the project. And then Fred Stein from the Delaware River Keeper Network will discuss impacts to the Delaware River. And then finally, Teresa Bender, one of the founding members of CFSD, will discuss the details of commenting on this amendment, how to submit written comments, who to submit them to, when to submit them by, and also how to participate in the public hearing scheduled for August 5th. So, what are the water quality management planning rules? They are very complicated New Jersey regulations having to do with different aspects of water quality, and they can be found in the New Jersey Administrative Code, Title 7, Chapter 15, and they are implemented by the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. The water quality management planning A large part of it is responsive to the Federal Clean Water Act. There are several minimal provisions of the federal legislation which our state water quality management plan rules implements. They also regulate and coordinate wastewater throughout New Jersey and determine sewer service areas where sewers can be installed, where they cannot be installed, more importantly, and also what's on sewer, what's on septic, what's on smaller wastewater treatment plants, also known as package plants, which this applicant is proposing to construct. Water Quality Management Plan, or WQMP rules, also implements a statewide overall water quality management plan for the entire state and then divides it into smaller sized WQMPs known as area wide WQMPs, either administered as by a planning agency, which is either the county, or if the county did not want that responsibility, it would defer to the Department of Environmental Protection to be the planning agency. So up in Sussex County, they have a county water quality management plan, but here in Warren County, they did not want that responsibility. So several municipalities were packaged together in the Delaware Basin, and an area was defined known as the Upper Delaware Water Quality Management Plan, which this applicant is seeking to amend in order to get approved for sewer service. WQMP rules also implement TMDLs, total maximum daily loads, which are water specific water quality impacts, whether a condition such as water temperature or a contaminant or dissolved solids or phosphorus, whatever has been identified which is excessive and causing problems for that water, the state has determined a maximum level that this water can have. It would permit no activity which would allow an excess of that identified maximum daily load. And that is in order to restore the water quality of that waterway. Water quality management plans also distribute watershed management grants to either nonprofits or municipalities or counties or municipal utility authorities to do certain projects that will improve water quality within an identified watershed. So this application, known as the White 519 Commerce Center, White Township 519. It's on County Road 519, and it is. I guess they don't want to call it a warehouse. They're calling it a commerce center. So the White 519 Commerce Center, the official name of the applicant here, proposes to amend the Upper Delaware Water Quality Management Plan to establish a 62-acre discharge to groundwater sewer service area on its overall 334 acre parcel. The 62 acre sewer service area cannot have certain impacts to certain protected features. The applicant will make certain claims or has made certain claims in their application. Some of them we feel need to be challenged, or the impacts have not been identified, properly identified, and should have been. A sewer service area cannot be created or extended into a environmentally sensitive area, an ESA. And what is an ESA? An ESA is an area of 25 acres or larger, consisting of either threatened and endangered species habitat or a natural heritage priority site. That's an area that has unique habitat for a statewide or federally or globally threatened species, usually a plant species, and there are many in the highlands. And they are identified because they are priority places to consider for conservation, for purchasing and preserving. An ESA is also any category one water, which is a high quality water identified under New Jersey surface water quality standards, nor can they disturb vegetation within that 300-foot buffer. So category one waters and the associated 300-foot riparian buffer on either side of the bank cannot extend sewer service. Also, there can be no identified wetlands in a sewer service area. Some of these we will be challenging, and the experts that you'll be hearing tonight will talk about specifically where we challenge what the applicant has claimed. The sewer service area also should be consistent with municipal zoning, or on a county has an open space master plan. Is it zoned for open space? Is it zoned for agriculture? Is it zoned for light industry, or whatever the county's long range planning mechanism is? It should be consistent, as well as any regional master plans. So that is the scope of the water quality management plan rules. I will now introduce Tom Boldowski. As I mentioned, he's a resident of the area, a founding member of Citizens for Sustainable Development. Tom is also a professional engineer. He has a very detailed discussion, and I think you'll find him to be very informative. So, Tom.
I have been intimately involved with the Jaindl project since April of 2019, as has my organization. And we have now been fighting this project for 3 years. And the reason is that we strongly believe that it will destroy the rural quality of life that we have all come to cherish. Elliot didn't mention this, but it's perhaps, it shouldn't go without saying. I want to emphasize to everyone on this webinar that the proposed water quality management plan amendment is vital to the Jaindl project. And what I mean by that is that if they don't get this water quality management amendment, they don't have a project, okay? And that's how important what we are doing tonight and on the 5th is. So we solicit your help in convincing DEP to deny Jaindl's application. The proposed water quality management plan for Jaindl land will facilitate a project which possesses immense potential for serious environmental impacts, including groundwater degradation, surface water pollution, and wildlife disruption. My assignment tonight is to talk about the Jaindl Stormwater Management Plan. I first wanted to give a bit of an oversight of the project, but I'm going to assume that most of the people, if not all of the people on this call, already know what or where the project is. So I'd like to move on, Fred, to slide B1. Next one, please. There we go. This is the overview of the current Jaindl layout. Phase 1 building is to the right. Phase 2 is to the left. Phase 2 embodies 1.9 million square feet in size, and phase 1 is 0.8 million for a total of 2.7 million. The Delaware River is to the top of this slide, and Foul Riff Road, to orient people, is to the right of the phase 1 building. 519 is running horizontally north and south, so that we can, if we talk north and south, we all know which way we're all talking. The river runs from north to south, 519 runs from north to south. The largest building here is 2,900 feet long. That's over a half mile in length. And they're trying to put a flat building on a rolling terrain. And in doing so, they're going to be cutting into the hillside by as much as 52 feet. That's twice the height of an average two-story home. The buildings themselves will be 65 feet tall, which far surpasses most anything in White Township. And in total, the buildings will contain 2.65 million square feet. The seventh biggest warehouse complex, not only in Warren County, not only in New Jersey, but the entire USA. Right here in Warren County, right on Route 519, and right in your backyard. Alongside the buildings, right up against the buildings, are 547 loading docks. Off the short end of the buildings are 1,500 car parking stalls, and behind the loading docks, or the trailers that are parked at the loading docks, are 913 trailer storage stalls. Just to give some perspective to this, if all of those storage trailers were laid end to end without cabs, they would stretch more than 7 miles long. That's how large this project is. The Institute of Transportation Engineers predicts that this type of warehouse, and we do have some question as to whether what actually goes in there is going to be what Jaindl is purporting, but using his use, the Institute of Transportation Engineers expects that 3,900 vehicle trips per day will be generated from this facility, including 1,260 truck trips per day, and perhaps a lot more. Before I leave this site, in the lower right-hand corner, I want to point out that this project also involves the widening and relocation of much of Foul Riff Road. And we'll talk about this later. All right, next slide, please. This is a summary of pretty much what I just talked about, but I included two areas in red which directly pertain to stormwater management, and that is the total disturbed land that is involved in this project, and that's 150 acres. And the total impervious surface that will be introduced by this project. And obviously the total impervious surface is permanent loss of prime farmland. But we're talking about 123 acres of impervious surface. Both of these elements change the land cover complex of the site from farmland to something else, and both of them drive up the runoff from the site. I'd like to talk about stormwater management, which pertains to those two items, but stormwater management at this site cannot be discussed without first talking a little bit about karst. I'm sure everyone has heard the term. In our first seminar, we went over this briefly, but karst is a topography formed by the dissolution of soluble rock, such as limestone, dolomite, and gypsum, and is characterized by underground drainage systems with surface subsidence, sinkholes, and caves. Well, What does that mean? It means that the rainfall that hits this site because of the geology dissolves the underlying rock. And that is a key component of management of both stormwater on this site and also the sewage treatment on this site. Next slide, please. This is a slide that shows that the Jaindl site is completely underlain by carbonate rock. The orange color is the lower Beekman Formation, a lighter color being the Allentown Dolomite Formation. There isn't an area on this site that isn't underlain by some form of carbonate rock. We know that this is a karst site. Even Jaindl's expert admit that this is a karst site. And local farmers and historical aerial photographs attest to the existence of recurring sinkholes on this site. And we have the proof. Next slide, please. Okay. If you take away anything from this seminar, then this is what, you don't need to memorize it, but this is what you should have in the back of your mind. This is an excerpt from the DEP Best Management Practice Manual, section 9.7. And it reads, and it'll need a little bit of explanation. The presence or absence of karst topography is an important consideration when designing a small-scale bioretention system designed to infiltrate into the subsoil. In areas of the state where this type of geology, the bedrock is composed of highly soluble rock. If karst topography is present, infiltration of runoff may lead to subsidence and sinkholes. And this is the key point, the last portion of this. Therefore, only bioretention systems designed with underdrains should be used in these areas. Let me repeat that because this is a key to what we're objecting about. Therefore, only bioretention systems designed with underdrains should be used in these areas. Well, obviously DEP feels that promoting infiltration on karst is a problem. So the first question that you may ask is, what the heck is a bioretention system? Briefly, a bioretention pond is a structure that possesses a sandy earthen bottom, nominally 2 foot thick, and it is densely planted with wet-tolerant species. In combination, these elements are intended to capture debris and suspended solids from the small first flush of runoff events. In an underdrain pond, the pipes are placed on the bottom beneath the soil, and there is no release to the groundwater. That's on an underdrained pond. In an infiltrative pond, there are no underdrains, and the stormwater is permitted to seep into the soils. Those are known as infiltrative bioretention facilities. Both of those types are supposedly good to remove for a removal efficiency of 80 to 90%. So let's see what Jaindl is actually proposing. Next slide, please. Pretty colors. This is quite a complex stormwater management project. This is phase 2, but there are similar elements in phase 1. Unfortunately, they don't have a single document that covers both phases. So I'm showing you phase 2. This plan is intended to address DEP's requirements for A, reducing peak rates of runoff, B, reducing suspended pollutants, and C, preserving the amount of groundwater infiltration. To achieve these goals, the slide shows three basic elements: bioretention ponds with underdrains, which are in dark green there, and also the aqua color ones on the other side of the building. Those are all ponds with underdrains. In lime green, they have bioretention ponds without underdrains. And the purpose of that is to meet what is known as the groundwater recharge requirement. And then C is in light blue, the detention ponds, which receive overflow from the bioretention ponds and the clean runoff from like the roof and non-trafficked areas. The problem with this design is its intentional violation of section 9.7 of the regulations cited above. In a known karst terrain with a history of documented sinkholes, the design engineer is employing a total of 10 infiltrative bioretention ponds in direct violation of the DEP guidance. These ponds are effectively concentrating stormwater into relatively small areas, contrary to good engineering practice. This element of employing infiltrative ponds on karst is an important point for you, the public, to bring up when you're making comments to DEP. It's contrary to their guidance, okay? Everybody recognizes that sinkholes pose a structural concern, and directing concentrated stormwater to karstic carbonate rock is simply asking for trouble. Sinkholes can undermine the pond itself, as well as down gradient structures such as roadways. But perhaps more important is the concern over directing partially treated contaminated runoff to the groundwater where highly erodible carbonate rock exists. The bioretention pond is of questionable efficiency for removing dissolved solids, such as road salts. The Jaindl warehouse embodies 60 acres of impervious parking area, which will require salt treatment in the winter. Using guidance from the state of New Jersey Road Department, we could expect about 288 tons of salt to be spread on this site annually. Some of this will be delivered to the recharge ponds, the yellow ponds, while much of it will escape to the Delaware River as outfall from the detention ponds. Bioretention ponds are also of questionable efficiency for removal of petroleum hydrocarbons, which will undoubtedly be generated by more than 1,000 truck trips daily. These include motor oil, gasoline, diesel fuel, which may pass through either to the groundwater or to the surface waters. Since this project is located in an agricultural area covering thousands of acres, spanning several towns, we can expect that existing groundwater quality should be good and should be devoid of priority pollutants. But Jaindl has yet to assess background groundwater quality beneath the site to establish a starting water quality benchmark. He has not definitively determined the direction of the groundwater movement so that pollution migration can be properly monitored. Both the infiltrative and underdrain bio retention ponds require appreciable maintenance, which can include inspections after significant rainfall events, replacement of filter media, maintenance and replacement of internal vegetation. All totaled, the plan that you're looking at depicts roughly 60 bioretention ponds scattered all the way around the perimeter of the site, as you could see. They will all require periodic maintenance to remain functional. Improper maintenance will lead to reduction in pollutant capture and the consequential impact on the Delaware River. So just who is going to maintain these facilities once they are sold to two different entities? Remember, these are on two different lots. They're being processed as two different applications. There is no indication that Jaindl is going to continue to own these, either of these or both of these. The township's stormwater general permit, MS4 permit, requires that the facilities, all stormwater facilities, be properly maintained and that the township monitor them. If they don't do it, if the owners don't do it, guess who does? The township. It falls on the township to maintain the facilities at their expense. Now, those of you from White Township know darn well you don't have the manpower to undertake a project such as this on a periodic basis. I'd like to move on to slide H, please. Okay, this is a good point to talk about the widening and relocation of Foul Riff Road. This is the plan of what they are planning on doing, and the plan the plan essentially calls for sliding the intersection south by approximately 100 feet to accommodate right turns from southbound trucks off of 519. The design, however, because it is new impervious surface, incorporates two bioretention ponds, which are not shown, but also 4 manufactured treatment devices, which I have labeled MTDs on this plan. These facilities all will be in the township right-of-way, and accordingly, their maintenance will be the township's responsibility. Maintenance will be appreciable, and township manpower sources are limited. There is no indication that the township wishes to undertake this responsibility and cost to the benefit of Jaindl. The widening and relocation of Foul Riff Road also impacts Buckhorn Creek. That is to the left of this drawing by several hundred feet, but this is all tributary to Buckhorn Creek, which carries a Category 1 surface water quality designation, the best rating for quality and wildlife habitat in the state. Almost all of the reconstructed roadway drains to Buckhorn Creek, and you're only seeing a part of the reconstruction. The reconstruction goes all the way up to the entrance of the Phase 1 building, and we're talking probably about 1,500 to 2,000 feet of new roadway, new widened roadway. The intensified use of the widened Foul Riff Road will release new pollutant loads, including road salts, to the creek, despite textbook methods of addressing stormwater quality. This slide also shows an existing vernal pond, which I also have labeled. This pond, well, I really haven't mentioned this yet, but I show you the old or the current alignment of Foul Rift Road. The new alignment is, as I said, 100 feet toward the south. And by pushing this alignment in that direction, they're going to impact what we consider to be an important vernal pond. We're going to explore that pond a little bit later in the webinar. Let's move on to the next slide, please. My final issue is to mention the on-site sewage disposal system. This slide shows 8 disposal fields to the east of Phase 1 building, and I have them pointed out to you. Each is over 4,000 square feet in area. By design, they are intended to disperse effluent from the on-site treatment plant, which I've also labeled. We are talking about 40,000 gallons of sewage each and every day being released to the ground through those disposal fields into highly erodible karstic rock. The potential impact to groundwater is obvious. What makes this situation worse than the stormwater bio retention ponds scenario is the fact that the sewage disposal fields are located uphill from the very production wells, which will be providing drinking water to the employees of the warehouses. I also have those highlighted. This is a real concern given the site's geology. This concludes my segment on stormwater. And I know this is a lot of technical information, but we will summarize it and post it on the CFSD website and Facebook pages for your reference when you write to the DEP. I cannot stress enough how important it is for you and your neighbors to send your comments to DEP. Any comments to DEP. They are principally going to be interested in water and groundwater and surface water integrity. But if you feel strongly about other issues that we haven't covered this evening, please write to them. And please attend the meeting if you can on August 5th. Remember that you have the ability through your comments to influence the future of this project. At this time, I'd like to turn the program over to a fellow professional engineer, Jeff Gull from Princeton Hydro.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen. A very good presentation. Thank you, Tom. That was great. Okay. So what I'd like to start talking about, my area that I'm discussing, and can everybody see that slide where it says
Yes.
Yep. Jaindl site? So one of the things we're going to talk about is karst. What is karst? What is carbonate rock? And why is it important with regard to this water quality plan, proposed water quality management plan amendment? So very quickly, and I believe Mike Sinkovich is going to talk more about some of the legal end of this. But from a policy part of this, when you're reviewing it, one of my objectives is to get the people that are in attendance today the tools and the language to be able to utilize to talk intelligently to the DEP when you submit your comments, either live or in writing. And what you're really being asked to review, and what the public has been asked to review, is the review of this site under the water quality management planning regulations. And as part of that, there are 2 specific policy goals that anybody commenting should include in their comments. And this way you're linking your concerns, not just to in general about the environmental degradation of the site, which we expect to occur, but also to be able to link it to something that the reviewers and the regulators can then compare to, and then make a decision based on your input and your local knowledge. The two are there's number two under policy goals is conserve the natural resource of the state, promote environmental protection, and prevent the pollution of the environment of the state. That is what this is for. What they will look when they look at these plans, they'll look at the environmental constraints or environmentally sensitive areas, as was discussed earlier. But what they need to understand is there's also, because we have karst and carbonate rock here, it is underneath the site the entire site is essentially an environmentally sensitive area. And also number four, that ensure that the projects and activities affecting water quality are developed and conducted in a manner that is consistent with this chapter and adopted water quality management plans, meaning there are water quality standards that must be met to maintain the designated use of that groundwater. And so it's very important for these plans not to promote projects that would otherwise promote degradation of your drinking water. So really quick, wastewater and karst. And I just wanted to kind of play this out in very simple. A lot of homes, especially in this area of New Jersey, have septic systems. The Commerce Center site is going to be promoting a very large, as Tom had mentioned, 40,000 gallons per day. You're dealing with homes where you're dealing with maybe 800 gallons a day, where this site is going to be pushing 40,000 gallons per day into your groundwater system. And the way that septic systems work is they primarily, when they discharge out to the field, the wastewater is treated, and then it comes out into a drain, what's called a drain field. And the primary mechanism for treating the wastewater as it comes out of the septic tanks and the treatment system is that it has to filter through the soil. Soil has an amazing ability to convert a lot of the waste into and absorb it and convert that waste into a more benign and less dangerous type of constituent. It doesn't mean there's not nitrates going into groundwater, but that's what the soil is all about. And what I'm going to show you is that if that is bypassed, especially in a system such as a limestone formation or a carbonate formation, then that can be bypassed, and you're essentially mainlining that wastewater to your groundwater system. And so that's something that is really critical in understanding also when you're commenting and relating it back to the water quality planning regulations. Excuse me. So if there is limestone and dolomite, what is carbonate rock? Well, carbonate rock is limestone and dolomite. And I'll describe the difference between these two. For the most part, the common term that everybody uses is limestone, but not all carbonate rock is limestone, and I'll explain why. Limestone has a much higher component of calcite. It's like a calcium carbonate formed hundreds of millions of years ago in shallow seas, where shellfish and other carbonate holding organisms died and fell down to the ocean bottom and piled up and concentrated in these limestone these carbonate formations. Dolomite is a metamorphosed limestone. It's where magnesium actually combines with the calcite in the simplest terms, and the magnesium actually gives it a bit more resistance to solutioning than limestone. So one of the things you'll find is you're not going to find, as the applicant's consultant stated, you're not going to find massive, large caverns like you would in Kentucky, where there's more pure limestone, or in Florida, where homes disappear. But nonetheless, dolomite still goes into solution, still forms fissures and cavities in the limestone enough, or in the dolomite formations enough to provide direct conduits and sometimes promote the existence of sinkholes. And I'll show you a little bit about that. The Jaindl site is underlain by dolomite. and as stated earlier, is underlain by the Allentown Formation and the Beekmantown Group. So here is an idealized sketch of what's called karst. So what is karst? Well, karst is not carbonate rock. Karst is actually the landform that actually is created as a result of the geologic dissolutioning of carbonate rock and the loss of soil through that system. So, for example, karst features, as you may have heard during the planning board meetings, include sinkholes, pinnacles, closed depressions, disappearing streams, sinking streams. Anywhere and there's actually what was described as the vernal pool over at the corner, I believe it's 519 and Foul Riff Road at the prior planning board meeting, is a surface closed depression that is formed because water actually was artificially discharged into that location and has likely over time pushed the soil down into existing fissures and now is creating a sinkhole. And so when you disturb a site, you can actually change the way water drains through it. And as Tom stated before, as water is infiltrating into the ground in its natural state, it becomes into an equilibrium. Now, if you're concentrating it and putting it in different locations, it will actually now start to disrupt and can shift soils and create sinkhole formations. So this is sort of a cross section, and not in this location, but this is essentially what, if you look at a cross section of pinnacles and fissures in bedrock, this is not that unusual. When you look at the cross section here, you'll see these voids in the rock. You'll see these arrows pointing to these fissures in these locations. And soil actually generally bridges over top. But as surface water runoff infiltrates and it goes down into these voided areas, it'll sometimes carry that soil with it. And when it does that, it starts to create these subsurface bulbs of open areas. And as they rise to the surface, they will then expose themselves as a sinkhole. So this is what karst is. It's landscape underlain by limestone or dolomite, in parentheses, which has been eroded by dissolution, producing ridges, towers, fissures, sinkholes, and other characteristic landforms. So here's an idealized look at, this is a concept that we had prepared for another project in the region, but a similar type of scenario. Why is this important to the promotion of wastewater to the subsurface? Well, what ends up happening, because you have these large open storage areas for where soil can go into, then the soil actually will sink down and create direct conduits. I look at these subsurface conduits in the bedrock as that. They're almost like piping systems that promote and carry water from the surface. And when a sinkhole forms and is exposed, it'll actually transfer water from the surface untreated into the groundwater. And so essentially, when you look at the Delaware River, for example, these fissures can carry back into the landscape on both sides of the river. And so really, the Delaware River isn't just here. The Delaware River is a system of subsurface caverns, especially when you're dealing in a carbonate formation. What was mentioned earlier by Tom was that there's the Buckhorn Creek, which is a C1 water, water course. Category 1 waters have the highest water quality in the state and are designated and have what are called non-degradation standards, meaning there can't be a measurable or calculable change or impact to the water quality. One of the things you find, especially that Mr. Sosowski or Dr. Sosowski, the municipal consultant on karst and carbonate rocks, has indicated at the planning board hearings is that the applicant has not shown through a shadow of a doubt any doubt that there's potentially not water going to Buckhorn Creek. What that means is if this wastewater ended up going to Buckhorn Creek, there would be a calculable or measurable difference, especially if sinkholes formed in the area or it discharged and was untreated and went to the subsurface and then carried over. And even the Delaware River, a very large economic powerhouse for this region, the water quality could be negatively impacted in this area. And this doesn't include the wells and things like that. But you can see if there's things like that can occur, such as this is what's called an incipient sinkhole, meaning the sinkhole is actually rising to the surface. It's almost like a bubble coming up. And then once the soil, enough soil comes down and it reaches the surface, it then will manifest itself into a sinkhole like this. So one of the things that I wanted to actually provide a couple of other, another resource that can be used when you're writing your comment letters. We'd like you to obviously use that terminology if you can, in relation to your own specific circumstance and concern about the system. But one of the other things that is another resource, can people see this?
Yes.
Yeah, this is, if you Google NJDEP space GeoWeb, GeoWeb, you can then click on to the New Jersey GeoWeb site, and it'll actually pull up the state of New Jersey, and you can then zoom in and look at these areas. And this is the vicinity. This is the Jaindl site right here. You can see the solar farm that's to the south. This here is Buckhorn Creek. And when you click on this, for example, and you click on Buckhorn Creek, it shows the property information. It shows the county here, and it shows Category 1 of Buckhorn Creek. Tom actually had a great illustration here, but when you're writing your letters, you can actually come into here and you can go and print and overlay the bedrock geology. And by clicking on that, you can then come in here and you click on this and you hit these arrows and you'll see this is the Allentown dolomite. This is the carbonate formation that underlays the site, just like in Tom's presentation. When you look over here, this is the Beekmantown group. This is the other carbonate formation that is underlaying the site. And so you can use this information. You can look for wetlands. You can look for all kinds of things as you write your comments and submit them to DEP. So with that, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Mike Sinkovich, an attorney, and he is going to talk about the legal aspects of the project.
Thank you, Jeff and Tom, and thanks for setting this up. And I hope everyone can hear me. I'm not as enthusiastic as usual because I came down with COVID this morning, but I'm hanging in there. And thanks again for being with us today. It's a great turnout. So my name is Mike Sinkovich. I represent the Delaware Riverkeeper Network. Of course, as you can imagine, the Delaware Riverkeeper Network is, concerned with not only the preservation, conservation of the river itself, but of course the environs of the river, the surrounding areas, just like White Township, and in particular the site, which is just adjacent to the river, as everyone knows. What I wanted to do just briefly is give an overview of where we are both in this process, meaning this water quality management plan amendment process, as well as the planning board process, which I'm sure a lot of you have been following, or at the very least have been hearing about. So some of the approvals, of the many approvals that are needed by Jaindl, one of the main things that they need is planning board approval from the White Township Planning Board. And those are the hearings that Tom has referenced and Jeff has referenced, which have been going on. I think the first hearing I attended was January of 2020, because it was before I knew what COVID was. We were there in person, and they've been going on now for, whatever this is, 2+ years and counting, and will be going on for some time going forward. And For planning board approval, what that means is Jaindl needs to prove that it follows the ordinances of the township, that it can meet all of the standards, and that it can develop this project as anticipated under an ordinance. And what we've been doing throughout this process, of course, we're primarily concerned with the environmental aspects of the process, and we have been focusing on the two areas that Jeff and Tom just spoke about, which are the stormwater management portion of this project and the carcinogeology portion, both of which sort of mesh together, as Tom mentioned, in stormwater, and both of which deal considerably with the how the the natural resources of the groundwater, the C1 stream and the Buckhorn Creek and the Delaware River are affected and impacted by this project. What we have been doing through cross-examination throughout this process, through the community concerns that you have all been raising, are we're forcing the applicant to continue to make changes to try to comply with the ordinance. We're also, which I think is really important, is we're forcing the board itself to take a really hard look at this project and to raise its concerns and understand our grave concerns about what this would mean to the area and the natural resources. And what we have been doing, just a little background, of course, is, we've been working, I personally have been working with Tom and Fred, who you hear from later, and Jeff, preparing experts, getting ready for cross-examination, and we will have our experts ready to testify at the planning board hearing coming up to talk about, our perspective on some of these issues that those of you that have been participating have heard, Jaindl's side of the story, and to a lesser extent, the township side of the story as well. And we're ready to give our perspective on, what we believe the real story is here. And again, as I mentioned, we continue to work closely together with all of our experts, and it's a challenging process because, as you have all seen, the project continues to change. Sometimes that means it's a good thing because we're forcing them to do things that are better. Sometimes that's frustrating for all of us because we have to continue to not start from scratch, but to relook at new plans and new procedures that they're going to implement if this project is approved. So with the planning board process, all I can say is that it's still very important and continues to be important for everyone to participate, to show up in person or log into the Zoom as long as it's still available, to raise your questions because they are important and they're being heard, and they just highlight the difficulty of this project in and of itself. And just to go forward as to how the planning board process works, eventually, at some point, this will end. There will be a vote by the board, and the board will vote to either approve or deny the application. And then, however that plays out, there is, of course, possible challenges to the Superior Court of New Jersey to the extent, whether the project's denied and Jaindl decides to go there, or the project's approved and members of the community or whoever decide to take a challenge. And that's why the planning board process is important, because developing that record, the testimony, the questions, the cross-examination that's being asked, all goes into what would be reviewed to the extent that we ever get there. And hopefully we never have to, but if that's where we end up. What I wanted to switch to next, just a very general overview, is that's the planning board process, which is sort of the really, really big piece of this. What we're talking about specifically now, as Tom and Jeff and Elliot have already gone over, is the water quality management plan amendment. And that's something that the DEP, that Jaindl, of course, applied for. They had to present all of their reports and their plans. The DEP then has to review and make a decision as to whether to amend this plan or not amend it. First, I would like to note this isn't the only DEP approval they need. We could spend the next few hours going over some of the other things they need, like flood hazard area approvals and other, discharge to groundwater permits that are sort of part of this process that we're talking about now. But specifically with regard to the water quality management plan amendment, how this played out, as many of you know, is there was a public notice that was put out in which people could comment. A lot of you, I believe, did provide comments. We did through Jeff, provided a nice comprehensive comment about our technical concerns about this amendment. What ended up with that is after the 30-day comment period, the DEP saw the concerns of the public and decided to not only extend the comment period, but to also schedule this hearing that's going to be virtual via Microsoft Teams. That's on August 5th at 10 a.m. It's going to be what they call a non-adversarial hearing. What that means, the procedures of these things sometimes morph to what the project is and what the level of participation is. But generally what that means is there'll be an overview of the project, and then there will be an opportunity for the public to comment. That's what the notice said with the extension. That means you'll be able to, raise your hand and make a comment. And what Jeff said was really just the perfect comment right at the start, which is it's great if you can to try to tailor your comments to what we're specifically talking about, which is, in general, preservation of the sensitive environmental resources of the area and concerns about water quality, groundwater quality, things like that. That being said, also like Jeff said, also like Tom said, a comment's important regardless of what your concern is. And we encourage everyone to make a comment that has a concern, even if it doesn't have anything to do with groundwater. But that was a really good framework, the way that Jeff laid it out. As was also mentioned, there's after the hearing, a 15-day period in which you can write written comments. It's important that we have as many comments out there as possible. The reason for doing this, for both showing up and making a written comment, in my mind, is really threefold. You have, not only are you echoing or showing your concerns, advancing your concerns to the DEP who's making this decision, you're also, number two, developing what's called a record, which is to the extent that anyone believes this permit was wrongfully issued, or the amendment, I'm sorry, was wrongfully approved. There is a record there of concerns that were raised that somebody could look at, a court could look at, to the extent it ever went there. And third, and maybe the most important, and it's similar to my comment about the planning board, is the more participation we have, I believe the harder look the DEP will give to this amendment. I mean, they're going to see the grave concerns. They're going to really, hopefully, sharpen their pencils and really dive into the plans and see what we're looking at. And that's really what we want. I mean, the DEP is here for a reason. I know we all have our personal opinions, positive, negative, or somewhere in the middle with the DEP sometimes, but they're here to protect the environment and protect the environment of New Jersey, so that the more that we can provide them to think about is going to give them some time to really take a look at this. And that's, in my mind, the most important thing. I did want to note one thing that I saw on the public notice that maybe all of you saw as well, is that it does start at 10. It's supposedly going to end at noon, whether or not, it said whenever public comments over, or noon, whichever is earlier. So, there is, I guess I just wanted to raise that because I would like to get out as many people there to speak as possible, to the extent there is concerns. So, it's important to have a very comprehensive concern, but also remember, the longer you speak, you're taking up time for other people as well. So with all of that, I guess it's just, I just wanted to float that out there, and maybe we can all strategize individually or collectively on how best to work that out. Frankly, I haven't been to one of these in this particular situation in which there was a need to have it longer than the time set. I don't know exactly what the DEP will do. I mean, they kind of get to make the decisions as we go along, and if there's a lot of people, maybe there will be additional time. But I just wanted to float that out there as well. So I know I gave a really general overview, but I just wanted to, again, sort of echo what Jeff and Tom said about this legal process, in particular what we're doing now with the DEP. Please show up. It's if you have a concern, show up, make your comment. With the planning board, it's a marathon. We're not done. August is going to be important. August, the Jaindl is going to be talking about the stormwater plans, supposedly. I mean, things change at the last minute, but I encourage everyone. I know it's a long night. I know you all work. Nobody wants to sit there for 3 hours, but to be able to get out there and whether you're in person or on the video Zoom, to sit through, to make a comment if you have one, it's very important. We don't want to show the board or the DEP that there is an interest, that interest still remains, and that we still have these concerns. With that, I hope I gave a little bit of an overview and I didn't complicate this more than it needed to be. And I'll turn it over to Chris Amato, who I know has some really good insight on sort of the regional aspects of what's going on in Pennsylvania and New Jersey with these warehouses.
Hi, everybody. Chris Amato here. I'd like to talk to you about some of the regional impacts of warehousing. I grew up in White Township. I live in the Lehigh Valley. I'm a member of the third largest planning board in the state of Pennsylvania. I'm actually the vice chair of that board. And we have a warehouse problem. It all started back in 1991 with Nestle and other companies like that. And not that they are necessarily a problem, and it has progressed. We allowed the horse to leave the barn. Right now, we have well over 100 million square feet of warehousing and logistics in the Lehigh Valley, and that number continues to grow. Right now, on the books, there are over 26 million square feet of warehousing that is planned. And I'd like to make a special shout out to the folks on here from Upper Mount Bethel Township. They're fighting the good fight with us. I'm sorry that your voices have been stifled. It's a travesty. In Pennsylvania, we don't have nearly the number of tools that you have in New Jersey. Having said that, Pennsylvania is a right to develop state, so it's a little bit easier to get things done here in Pennsylvania. And in New Jersey, you have a tremendous number of tools at your disposal to ensure appropriate development. In the Lehigh Valley, we have a regional comprehensive plan. And we took public input into account when we developed that plan. And well over 90% of the voting public surveyed favors open space conservation, environmental preservation, and the quality of life aspects of our region. And those are diminishing rapidly. Lehigh County, which is where Allentown and Upper and Lower Macungie are located, is just about all built out. The target now is squarely on Northampton County. And Northampton County has let it be known that we're done. We're done with warehouses. We need more sustainable types of development. So what are people saying about what's been happening in the Lehigh Valley? Well, I found a social media post from somebody I grew up with. I went to high school with her. They're a good, solid, former Warren County family, salt of the earth people, highly intelligent. We've spent almost half of our lives in this neighborhood, raised our girls here, met some incredible people here, and have made so many memories. This isn't the blank, I don't want to call anybody out, township as we knew it when we moved here, though. The amount of development, particularly the way of warehouses, has become unbearable. All of the building leads to so many things: massive flooding, pushing animals out of their natural habitats, and wayward tractor trailers on the roads in and out of neighborhoods. It's clear that the decision makers don't care about the people that voted them in, as they put their own interests ahead of the communities they serve. And they clearly don't live near the sprawl, because if they did, they wouldn't have made the decisions that they did. It's truly been a great ride, and we're certainly looking forward to our next chapter. So here you have a wonderful, highly educated, productive family leaving the region. And it's a story that we're seeing more and more of because people are just unhappy with the quality of life that this type of development brings. We're fortunate because we don't have as much warehouse sprawl as the Inland Empire in California, and they're starting to become a lot more proactive, especially as it pertains to air quality measures. But I did some reading, and imagine buying a home for you and your family, only to find out years later that the land directly behind you was seriously considered for a 344,000 square foot warehouse, the equivalent of 6 football fields, less than 200 feet away from your door. This is the reality for residents in Bloomington, California, and a clear reminder how some elements of the warehouse industry continue to hurt working families in the Inland Empire. And this is happening in the Lehigh Valley as well. As land becomes more and more difficult to obtain proximal or close to infrastructure, we're seeing land that becomes developed farther and farther away from infrastructure, just like in White Township. And this isn't a Lehigh Valley problem alone. It's all of our problem. So how have warehouses affected life here? If you've ever driven on Route 22 in the afternoon, there are daily traffic jams going each way. You got to plan extra time to go anywhere. Trucks have been avoiding these traffic jams by going on the smaller side roads. This jams up side roads and puts trucks in places where they don't belong. We've seen severe degradation of our roads, causing extra wear on our vehicles. Used to be able to go a couple of years before having your tires aligned. Now, because of the wear and tear on our roads, pretty much seems like every year you have to have your tires realigned. And our roads are deteriorating rapidly. GPS units send trucks on the smaller roads into tiny neighborhoods where they don't belong. We've seen more flooding due to the amount of impervious surface that we have now. 20-year storms have become more frequent, and this flooding has become significantly problematic, especially in Lower Macungie, where you see a large proliferation of this type of development. In fact, Lower Macungie has pretty much shut the door on warehouse development because it's become utterly unsustainable for them. Light pollution eradicates the night sky. I see that from my house, and it's a shame. You used to be able to see the stars, and now you can't see quite as many of them. Loss of view sheds. You used to be able to see beautiful, pristine farm fields, and you could see the mountains in many places. A lot of that's being eradicated because of these massive buildings that change the view shed, and certainly not for the better. Somewhat resembles a J.R. Tolkien novel, like Mordor or something. Loss of irreplaceable farmland. We're looking at, in the Lehigh Valley, limestone soil, which is fantastic arable soil. Negative impacts on business. It's harder to get anywhere. I own a business, and my business depends on appointment times. It is nearly impossible to have patients show up on time because of constant traffic jams. Traffic, and more traffic. It goes without saying. Constant truck noise that disrupts our quality of life. I live out in a rural part of Northampton County, and because of a warehouse development going on in a neighboring township, we are constantly hearing triaxles day in and day out. The constant drone of a triaxle. It's almost impossible to enjoy silence. Now, a lot of local municipal officials truly believe in their hearts that they're doing the right thing and that this type of development will increase their tax base. And it will, for a little while, until the infrastructure bill comes due. So for a couple of years, you might enjoy diminished taxes to the residents. But who's going to pay for the roads once the developer is gone? Who's going to pay to maintain that infrastructure? Who's going to pay to maintain your stormwater systems? Falls on John Q. taxpayer. Let's talk a little bit about health. And this was written, this is an excerpt from the Inland County Empire News. And it's entitled, "Stop Building Warehouses Near Our Homes and Schools." By the way, this is pretty darn close to a school, this White Township complex. Trucks are going to be idling on Route 519, right next to White Township School. Expanding warehouses in the Inland Empire will certainly grow truck traffic in our neighborhoods and communities, and will further increase the spread of dangerous pollutants in our air, and ultimately hurt our children and families. Air pollution in our region, this is in California, is driven largely by the warehouse industry and contributes to 609 deaths and 1,371 major health incidents per year, causing negative economic impacts for communities like Bloomington. With the movement of diesel trucks in and out of warehouses in residential communities, children in schools and daycare centers are exposed to toxic diesel emissions that have long-term impacts on their health well into adulthood. This was written by Senator Connie M. Leva and Assemblywoman Eloise Gomez-Reyes. You just cleaned up what was happening in Upper Mount Bethel with that coal plant. Don't let it get ruined by all these diesel fumes that are going to be spewing through White Township through this excessive traffic. In the Lehigh Valley, we are struggling to breathe. We have among the worst air quality in the country. Diesel fumes and increased exhaust emissions cause an increased risk for stroke, heart disease, pulmonary disease, and an increased risk of kidney disease. Loss of quality of life due to health issues occurs. Diesel exhaust contains chemicals known as PM 2.5, that's particulate matter 2.5, also known as the invisible killer. And what that means is they are teeny tiny particles that are less than 2.5 microns in size, and they accumulate in your lungs continually, and they stay there. And they alone cause a dramatic increased risk for stroke and asthma. There are days in the Lehigh Valley where it's simply unsafe to go out in the public or to go outside because of the air quality. Don't make the mistakes that we make. Do be proactive. Your health depends on it. And warehouses never stop at one or two. Someone else will see the opportunity as well. And I have seen it happen time and time again, where a warehouse gets approved and someone else, or maybe the same entity, will buy land proximal to that is not zoned for that particular purpose. And they sue the local community to have that zoning changed. Or I've seen incidences where people didn't get what they wanted in terms of warehouse approval, and they threatened to do something else that was even less beneficial to the community. Not that a warehouse is that beneficial to your community at this point. But at any rate, my point is, don't let the horse out of the barn. Do your best to advocate for sound development practices. Thank you.
My name is Butch Van Setters, and I've been living here in the township, Harmony Township, for 43 years. And my wife and I enjoy the wildlife. We see it every day out our door. And I've been a wildlife enthusiast my whole life for as many species as long as I can remember. My wife Linda and I are very serious wildlife photographers, and we photograph wildlife all year round. Sadly, I have witnessed some of our local natural resources vanish and some go extinct right before my eyes. We've traveled to many of the great destinations to photograph, such as Africa and Alaska, but let me tell you, you can't beat home. Warren County, White Township area is very, very diverse environmental resources, but we are quickly and losing what we have to infringement and loss of habitat due to thoughtless greed. And that's basically all it is. The Jaindl project is one of our main examples. It must stop here. I could speak forever about our area's bounty and natural wonders, but tonight I speak about two. The snow geese. The snow geese, we winter here by the thousands and thousands, tens of thousands even. The geese are foraging in local fields. A prime site of occurrence is on the land of the proposed Jaindl project. These geese are there and they're replenishing themselves to carry on. They'll stay here as long as the weather is good and they can keep finding. So some winters they're here most of the winter until we get a heavy snow or whatever. So the first picture here are geese on the Jaindl property. You can see the towers across the river. This is a wonderful, wonderful place for these geese to feed. The second picture is a picture of North Atlantic flyway. The little star there shows you right where we are. Here the snow geese feed on the fields after harvest. The corn is very, very important to these birds. It gets them through the winter and sustain them until they return to their breeding grounds. These snow geese have characteristics that enhance our outdoor experience, reinforce our love of nature. Everybody loves to see these snow geese take off and the sounds they make, and it's just incredible. These are hard to forget. You watch the amazement and never forget snow geese are a beautiful sight to see. The second reason the Jaindl project should be halted, environmentally now this is the vernal pond at the intersection of 519 and Foul Rift Road. It would be destroyed.
That's it. Maybe you're gonna have to back up.
The vernal ponds are usually small, temporary isolated water bodies that form in woodland depressions and low marshes, and that's exactly what this is.
There you go.
When the snow melts and the springs come, vernal ponds provide breeding habitats for amphibians, frogs, toads, crustaceans. These animals are free from fish predators. There are some birds that go in there, like the herons, but basically they're free from other predators. Because of the pools are eventually dry up and are not connected to other bodies of water, by protecting vernal ponds, you are helping to care for frogs, salamanders, toads, and other animals that make them their home. Many of the amphibians found in vernal ponds are listed as threatened and endangered species. Great effort is being made to protect these remaining vernal ponds. Their disappearance marks the loss of rare, important habitat and some of the associated plant and animal species as well. Our vernal pond can be seen from either 519 or Foul Rift. I am sure most of you know where it is located. And it is exactly where Jaindl wants to put his new intersection for the tractors, trailers, and vehicles to enter and exit the warehouse. That vernal pond and all the critters that live in there and especially breed in there will be, their lives will be done, they'll be destroyed. They won't be around here anymore. So we can't let this destruction happen. Once this land is covered with macadam and structures, we will never get these beautiful open spaces back to nature as they should be. And finally, regarding wildlife, not regarding wildlife, but another very important reason to stop the Jaindl project and save these open spaces. Many years ago, this land was Lenape Indian encampment and burial grounds. It also included a small cave near the river. Over the years, many artifacts have been discovered and preserved from here. But if this property is covered, this project, any history will be beneath the land that we will be bought for. This is our home, and all of us should have a say about such important issues. We choose to live here because we love the open spaces, the wildlife, the flowers, the insects, and such. We do not live here to let it be destroyed. I hope this inspires some of you or all of you to send your comments and listen to the DEP prior to August 5th. Now, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Fred Stein. Fred is Citizen Action Coordinator for the Delaware River Keeper Network, and as you can probably tell, will speak about the Delaware River.
Thank you very much, Butch. Well, we've certainly heard a lot of different topics tonight, and I'm going to go over some of the water resources issues. Some of it will be was repeated from what Tom and Jeff and others have said. It's very important, though, for us to try and plant the seed in all of your minds that as you write your comment, to try and make it related to the water resources. That's a very important part of what DEP is going to be listening for. We urge you to take some notes and watch this PowerPoint or this webinar again. It'll be going up on the CFSD Facebook and websites in the next couple of days. So first, just the big picture of the Delaware River watershed. As you've heard, this development, Jaindl, has the real potential to bring contaminants to the Delaware River, where the Delaware River provides drinking water for 15 million people. It brings in an annual economic activity in recreation and fishing and crabbing and shipping, all sorts of economic value, $22 billion a year. It's a job creator, creating $10 billion worth of in wages. And there are many ecosystem services, and ecosystem services is that it helps, having a river nearby can provide drinking water. It can provide wildlife habitat that tourists come and take a look at and bring money for coffee shops and delis and hotels. Those are the sorts of economic drivers that a clean and healthy river can provide. And the Delaware River brings in $683 billion worth of that sort of income throughout the entire watershed. And in 2020, the Delaware River was the American River of the Year. A couple of the things that I want to focus on are the water resources of this area. These next couple of slides are from New Jersey GeoWeb, which Jeff had mentioned to you. That you can see from the yellow lines up here, 519 and Foul Rift Road, and the red circle is where the proposed widening is going to happen, and the vernal pond that Butch just got done talking about. You can see this from this dark blue streak that this is a part of the priority lands for water quality protection. This is a designation by the New Jersey DEP, and it's in a medium high category. And so, and I'll quickly read this: lands that are important for water and water resources, areas in natural cover where water can recharge into aquifers. As you can see, if the road is widened and moved, it's going to fill in part of those important priority lands. And even though it's a lower priority, but where the warehouses will actually go, again, they're going to cover this farm field that right now slowly percolates water down into the groundwater, recharging the groundwater, and slowly working its way over to the Delaware River. It's going to turn that into nearly 3 million square feet of warehouse space and impervious coverage that will generate stormwater runoff and sewage discharge, as you've heard by the earlier speakers. So again, these are sorts of things that we need to bring up to DEP, why these different water resources issues are so important. This area is also a part of a wellhead protection area, and please forgive the cartoonish looking design that I did here, but you can see that the green area here is part of the community wellhead protection area. So what this means is that it's nearby this green stripe is an aquifer area where water is being drawn from, and there may be wells in this green striped areas, but certainly having the road realigned and widened is going to have an impact on how much rainwater and melting snow is going to be able to percolate back down through the ground and recharge that groundwater and be part of that wellhead protection area. The other important water resource is this image here is from New Jersey DEP, and this is this is from FEMA. Sorry, this indicates the flood hazard area, and Jaindl is going to have to apply for and get another DEP permit for the flood hazard area. But you can see this is an area that's susceptible to flooding, and because of that, it has there's a higher elevation of protection, and that's why it requires a different permit for DEP to look at specific issues. But here again, this is a water resource that is going to be threatened by the Jaindl project, particularly right here where the 519 and Foul Riff Road come together, and the widening is going to occur. It's right in a flood hazard area, and you can see the same is true with the Buckhorn Creek. Flows down here from the mountain down underneath 519 and even though the warehouses will be a distance from the Buckhorn Creek, there's no indication, there's no definitive study or information that says that sewage that Jaindl will be discharging into the ground and that stormwater that will be discharging into the ground, that some of it can't work its way back away from the Delaware River and into the Buckhorn Creek, which is a Category 1 waters. And that's another point we'll be bringing up to New Jersey DEP. These resources are rare in the state of New Jersey, and having a Category 1 stream flowing so close through your communities is a real asset. And we need to protect them, and to willy-nilly just assume that the sewage and the stormwater is flowing the other way. It's irresponsible, and those are some of the issues we're going to be bringing up to DEP. Next, I'd like to talk briefly about flooding. We're talking about a huge amount of impervious coverage with the rooftops of the 3 million square feet of warehouse space and all the parking lot, all the roadways and the road widenings. That's only going to increase flooding. And now this flooding here, of course, is in Belvedere, which is upriver. But I use this slide just to show that flooding is already a problem in this community and in this area. And the storms are getting more intense, more frequent. And so paving over all of that open space, all of that farmland, and with impervious coverage is only going to make things worse. And maybe not in Belvedere, but it all flows downhill, and it could hurt Harmony, could hurt other communities downstream in Warren County, but certainly it all goes down into Easton. Easton has a huge flooding issue, and the river continues right on down. And that same flooding, it's a watershed issue. All that water flows downhill. And so Trenton, all the way down, in fact, all the way into Philadelphia, where the river flows out into the bay. It all flows downhill. And that's why poorly cited projects like the Jaindl warehouse have to be stopped, because there are places where development should occur. This is not a smart place to build it in the middle of a farm field. Next, I'd like to talk quickly about the air quality and air pollution. This is just brief, but as those thousands of truck trips every day go through our streets, through Warren County and White Township streets, there's a lot of pollutants that come from these vehicles. We've all seen these images on parking lots and shopping centers. Well, this is just non-point pollution that flows off of parking lots, and Jaindl is going to have a massive parking lots with trucks and cars going every day, and that those pollutants are gasoline and diesel, antifreeze, and heavy metals, and it all flows downhill, and it goes into Jaindl's, in this case, it'll go into the Jaindl stormwater system, but that stormwater system is not going to be designed to capture all of those pollutants, all of those oils, all of those antifreezes and all the road salts, all the road salt that'll be dumped onto the street, as Tom mentioned. Part of that is going to make it down into the groundwater, and with the karst geology, with some of those pollutants going down in there and finding nooks and crannies to flow and go in different directions, could cause definite problems in the Delaware River, and possibly even into the Buckhorn Creek. And another point I want to make, all of this toxic fumes going up from those diesel trucks immediately go up into the air. As you can see from the top line of this chart, the heavy duty diesel trucks could generate as much as 147 tons of nitrous oxide emissions every day. Every time it rains, some of those pollutants come right back down to earth, right back down into our streams, right back down into our communities, on our laundry, on the clothesline. It's air pollution deposition it doesn't go, just disappears, drives down the hill. And my final point is that this warehouse is sitting right next to the lower Delaware scenic stretch of the Delaware River. And this is the image you see here is just on the other side of the tree line from where the Jaindl warehouse will be. The Jaindl property will be on the right side of this image. This is Foul Rift, part of one of the treasures of the Delaware River, and that brings hundreds, if not thousands, of recreational paddlers coming down the river. And look at that beauty. You can't, it's no reason why people want to come there. But with truck traffic, with the noise, trucks, lights, backing up, as a truck backs up and there's beeping going on, as people are looking for some recreation and high quality open space and recreational opportunities, the Jaindl project is going to diminish it to a degree. And some of the numbers that you can see here in the upper right-hand corner are just the number of jobs and the amount of wages and salaries and taxes that are brought in. These are just New Jersey. This is just New Jersey data, and it's pretty dated. It's 2019 because of the pandemic. people have found and rediscovered the outdoors. So many more people are going outdoors, not just on river excursions and paddling trips, but bicycling the country roads. And with that many more thousands of trucks going out on rural 519 and maybe into being waylaid and go up through Hope or through Belvedere, then that becomes that much more of a challenge for people to want to go and recreate on those backcountry roads, because they're not backcountry roads anymore. So these are other issues that you might bring up in your comment. So thank you very much. That ends my presentation. Thank you. I wanted to introduce Teresa Bender, is our last speaker of the night. She's going to help guide us on how to take all of this great information that we've heard tonight, and how do we actually write it and put it to work? How do we get to work, Teresa?
That's my specialty. So this is the part where we need your call for action. We provided you with a ton of information, but don't worry, we will be sending out copies of this webinar on social media. We'll be emailing it, and it'll be up on our websites. So you will have total access to this webinar. Our intent here was to provide you with valid information so that you are able to write informed public comments. They don't have to be highly technical. If you do not feel comfortable with the technicalities, leave that to our professionals, and really make the comments from your heart. Do not underestimate your comments. Any and all comments are welcome and will have a significant impact with this application. So let me start sharing my screen. If I'm able to. It says it's disabled.
Go ahead, Teresa, now you can.
Okay, thank you.
For my shorty shorts?
Chris, we don't want to see your shorty shorts. Okay. So again, with the public comment, we suggest making public comments both verbally at the DEP hearing on August 5th, as well as emailing and or mailing your comments. And they can be the same comment. It is okay. You can repeat yourself. Okay. None of our concerns, our comments, or our stories are inconsequential to this process. Everyone in your family, your neighborhood, and beyond can and should write a comment to the DEP. It doesn't have to be long, and I'm going to show you examples of what comments could look like, as well as provide you with a template. Okay. The purpose of sharing your public comments: number one, tell DEP about your concern on how this project might impact you and your community. It can relate to your well water, how you're concerned about it contaminating the groundwater. Hopefully we provided you with enough information on how to relate that to your well water and groundwater. The surrounding communities are all well and septic. The health of the Delaware River and Buckhorn Creek, your quality of life. This is a significant development. Nearly 3 million square feet of warehousing. And typically, if you double that, that is total impervious surface, 6 million, almost 6 million square feet, including the parking lots, including the roadways and the other structures that this project is going to need. The rural character of your community, the loss of prime agricultural lands. Remember, this is 600 acres of prime farmland. Nearly 300 will be used for this project. The dark night skies. We will be impacted by light pollution. The wildlife that you enjoy seeing. Any of the natural resources that come into play. Okay. Number two, to let the DEP know how many residents in White Township and beyond share these concerns and don't want this project built. We need quantity, quantity, quantity. We are stressing anyone and everyone needs to write or make a public comment to the DEP. The more people that show their concern over this, the bigger impact it will have at the DEP level. Number three, even if you live in a different area, you might talk about the impacts to the watershed and say why these rural agricultural areas in the Garden State are so important to preserve. As you know, Warren County is not the only county that's having warehouse issues. They are coming up and popping up all over the state. If there is no control over this, we will not have many areas of agricultural and open space left. Okay. So there are two ways to make your public comment. And again, we suggest coming to the public hearing if you're able to. And if not, then doing it through email or regular snail mail or both. Okay, so that, and again, I'm not going to go through all of these bullet points because this will be available, and this has been a long presentation, and we wanted to give you the most information so you can make those informed public comments. Okay, this is how to start via mail or email. The comment deadline here is August 20th, but it needs to arrive to the DEP by August 20th. They must reference the Jaindl amendment request, which is this program interest number and the activity number. Okay, again, these are the addresses. Okay, and this is a sample letter. Let me put this down here. You will see, you can put it just like a business letter, program interest, activity number, dear Mr. Mahon, and then you can start. I am so-and-so, I live here, and then start writing your concerns. This is the template, but you can fill it with whatever your concerns are. Here's another little sample that was provided for another project. And this was 4 or 5 sentences that was accepted by the DEP. Another one when I was in Boy Scouts, so someone really personalized how this is going to affect. And again, it could be as long or short as you need it to be. Okay. Oop. Some important reminders. The date of the public hearing is Friday, August 5th at 10 a.m. The deadline for written comments need to arrive by August 20th. Okay, include the following correspondence. And also we will, on Citizens for Sustainable Development, we will be posting updates and information constantly with regards to this public hearing. It's also important to note that we don't have the link yet to the DEP hearing. It will be provided on the DEP website August 4th, but we will also post it and disseminate that information out so that you guys will have it. And that is it for my presentation. I wanted to keep it nice and short. So I guess it's back to you, Elliot.
Thank you, Terry. Teresa, I'm actually going to put in the chat the document, the public notice that has all the information. I just put it there now. Anyone can access it. It's the
Perfect.
PDF that has all the information on the hearing date, how to register for the hearing, and both the physical address to send comments and the email address. And they will accept emailed comments. So it's there now. And if people have any other questions they want to put in the Q&A feature, I'll ask them to our panel. Although there's one question that's already in, it's been here for a while from Lori, and this is a question for Jeff well, Mike's gone. Does building a facility of this size and scope propose a risk to nearby homeowners, exposures to sinkholes? So if the water is carried in a new, different direction and the warehouse isn't impacted, but downstream properties have new sinkholes, is there any liability in the long term?
This is Jeff. That's a great question. It's actually a very complicated question. It depends on, how the water is potentially redirected. As Tom had shown in his the colored rendering of the site plan, there is going to be a significant amount of redirection of a lot of this water. Some of the real large concerns I would have is the redirection of actually surface water runoff. So surface water through swales. They talked about the intersection, where they're going to shift the road at Foul Rift and 519. That could also have an impact on triggering sinkhole activities. If one of the things I just found that was just posted to the website is their cut fill. There's a cut fill diagram. There are cuts proposed up to 60 feet, and as well as fills that are pretty heavy. And so that's going to require some blasting. So some of the concern there would be some of the vibrations from the blasting could potentially also trigger sinkholes in the vicinity of the project. How far that would travel, I don't know. It can be very variable, but even the cut fills is going to change a lot of the drainage patterns, both at the surface and the subsurface. So it is something that should likely not necessarily be brought up to for the water quality plan amendment, but at the planning board hearings, especially in light of the large scale cut fills that they're proposing, which could impact drainage patterns.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Nan Mason has a question, and if you unmute yourself, Nan, we'll be able to hear your question now.
Hi, is it possible for me to show you something? I know that you're not accepting video from the audience, but I have a rock that you might find interesting.
Well, I have to promote you to a panelist so we could see you. It may take a moment. Now, if you
vouch for Nan.
okay, Nan, can you turn on your video?
Yeah, okay. I see my name, but okay, start video. Hang on one second. Okay, good.
I don't think I can promote a panelist. I don't think you can show your screen. You may have to physically show us the rock.
Well, that's what, okay, well. Can you see that?
That's a rock.
Yeah, that's a rock. Is that karst? I don't live far from the Jaindl site, and I dug this up a few years ago when I was planting a tree, and it's been sitting out in my yard since, and it's been weathered. All of this was filled in with rock, with sandstone, I'm assuming, and it has since like eroded away because it's been exposed to the rain and everything. But you know, it might give somebody an idea of what karst
Sorry.
would look like once it
Definitely
dissolves.
looks like, I mean, it's a little hard to tell, but it definitely looks like a carbonate rock. And you can see the dissolutions between there, which is sort of looks like webbing in there.
Yeah,
The more resistant calcite lines there that are a little bit more resistant to dissolution and then the rock around it. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting looking rock, but and it's also an example of what can happen in the subsurface.
yeah. Well, I just figured if, you know, for people that didn't understand karst and you know, how the stuff dissolves, that's an example. But I just, I remember it out in my yard recently because I noticed that it's been weathering and more of it's been dissolving since it's been on the surface for about 3-4 years now. But yeah, it's pretty amazing. I thought it was cool. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Nan. Kurt from Phillipsburg asks if people from Phillipsburg or other municipalities should express their concerns with DEP. And absolutely, anybody, anywhere who has a concern about this project is invited and will be considered by DEP. They have to respond to all comments. But you don't have to be a White Township resident.
If I might ask a question, Elliot.
Yeah, go ahead.
I posted on our Facebook page a question asking if anyone had ever seen or filmed threatened and endangered species on the Jaindl site. I was surprised at the number of responses that I got, not necessarily proof positive with respect to actual film or actual photos, but some of the comments are quite compelling that in fact the Jaindl site does serve as either a forage site or a resting site. How would these people transmit that in a meaningful way to DEP?
Well, if you had budget to do so, hiring a wildlife expert to be able to verify. I mean, there's a process to go through to verify threatened and endangered species sighting, and someone who's qualified to make those sightings can make them, and then they become mapped and known as residents of that site.
I had seen some reference, I guess it was in a DEP notice of this hearing, that they consider on avian species a 2,000-foot radius. Is that, are you aware of that?
Well, for bald eagle, it's 2,000 feet. And what Jaindl is claiming, I don't know if this is true or not, is that their footprint is going to be outside of that 2,000-foot buffer for nesting eagle.
Okay. The reason I bring that up is that one of the respondents did in fact suggest that there is a nearby nesting site. And once again, how do they document it? How do we document it? without necessarily hiring an expert.
I don't know the process for verifying T&E species, but there is one. We might be able to get, I don't know if Delaware River Keeper Network has someone on staff. I know New Jersey Conservation Foundation has somebody who does this, who might be able to advise CFSD how to do that properly.
Okay, thank you.
A question for Fred. Please speak to the efforts to clean up the Delaware River, the recent progress that's been made with that, and how this development's stormwater runoff could reverse that progress.
Well, you know, there's a lot of times people will talk about how the Delaware River, not just the Delaware River, but waterways across the country have gotten significantly better over the decades, thanks to the Clean Water Act, which we're celebrating the 50th year celebration of the Clean Water Act. But there are still so many threats from non-point source pollution and the development that like the Jaindl project we're talking about is contributing to non-point pollution, and that's still a threat to the Delaware River. So in some ways, in some measurements, like bacteria and sewage discharges from urban areas, they've gotten better, and factory and industrial discharges, they've gotten better because those are now permitted and monitored to a much greater extent. But non-point pollution, like we're talking about here, the regulations aren't strong enough to really stop the pollution from reaching our waterway. So there's that threat.
Okay. Someone asked, Karen asked, is there a map on the DEP site of endangered plants and animals? And yes, there is. Both the Highlands Council interactive map and DEP GeoWeb, which Fred mentioned, does map the known endangered species that have been cited at a site. They do list them, but I mean, that changes. Some disappear and new ones come. I mean, that's really just a snapshot in time. That's why it's really important to have a wildlife specialist who can make an analysis, and not necessarily from on the site itself, because Jaindl is probably not going to give access, and it's a matter, you know, you can't trespass and say you saw something. That will not hold up in court. So do we, any more questions? I think we've answered most of them here. There is a question about, I'm not sure I understand the question, to the point of the redirection of water in a planning board meeting. Jaindl's expert geologist stated that it was unknown how much rock needed to be removed. I'm not sure what that's in reference to. Does that ring a bell to anyone here? Or maybe
Well, I guess I can start with that question, because I think it was my questions of the applicant that prompted the response. I kept on asking them for, if you will, a top of bedrock topography, with the idea of generating exactly what this participant is asking, and that is, if we know the surface of the rock, then just like any other quantity takeoff with earthwork, we could generate a quantity of bedrock. Their response was, well, essentially it's all over the place. Okay. And subsequent research on this from Jaindl's own reports suggest that on lot 16, we have a highly irregular pinnacled situation, which makes it extremely difficult to map the surface feature or the surface elevation of the rock. So putting those two together, we find that yeah, there are issues on this site with respect to depth to bedrock and how much rock is going to be removed on the site, because honestly, they don't know.
Another unknown about areas of karst topography is that we really don't know how groundwater and surface water interact with each other because there are sinking streams, water goes underground, can mix with groundwater. Groundwater can appear in karst areas very quickly to provide base flows to surface water. And if you discharge to groundwater, you may end up discharging to surface water. And it can be very risky. And stormwater can travel very quickly to groundwater sources, and something we have to be very careful about and have to alert DEP to. Any final thoughts, anybody?
I think I see a question from a Wilma Fry that maybe you want to entertain, Elliot. Just came on.
Oh, great. Hey, Wilma, is the Delaware River Basin Commission involved in this in any way as one of their functions to safeguard the river, water quality, et cetera? You know, I think that DRBC, if it's a surface water discharge to the Delaware River, they definitely would review and comment and have some authority. But as a groundwater discharge, where they're not discharging to either a tributary or directly to the Delaware River, I don't know if they would have jurisdiction. But because of the uncertainty when you're discharging to groundwater in a karst area, I think it's a very valid point to pursue. I don't know if anyone else has any further thoughts on that.
I would just weigh in. I do think it's a valid thought, and we should definitely reach out to DRBC. I know the water withdrawal, if it reaches a certain threshold, DRBC also gets involved in that. But this water withdrawal is projected to be much less than that threshold. But from what you were saying, the potential because of the karst geology, it is worth. That's a good thought that we'll follow up on.
Yeah, this is the Delaware River is a special resource protection, but unfortunately, it is stated earlier, DRBC doesn't necessarily directly regulate, especially if it's not having direct discharges to the Delaware River. But again, as Fred said, the karst connections could be an argument to be made.
Right. Another possible level of review and comment should be with the National Park Service, because because the Delaware is a wild and scenic river, and I don't know where there's odd noises are coming from, but because the WQMP rules are responsive to the Federal Clean Water Act, I believe that the feds would have an opportunity to comment on this project. And I think we should engage the National Park Service through the Wild and Scenic, or whoever manages the Wild and Scenic designation for this portion of the Delaware. And checking if there are any more questions. Wilma asks if the Highlands Coalition can put, I guess, the information on the hearing on our website, and we'll definitely get that information to you, Wilma. I don't see any other questions. I want to thank everybody. We've had almost 100 people on this information webinar tonight. I hope we get 100 people to comment. I know the last WQMP amendment where there was great public interest was one in Hunterdon County in New Jersey. And DEP is supposed to, because this is a regulation, after they have within 1 year of proposing to adopt, and the public comment period on that amendment closed in January 2020, and they still haven't come to a decision. So the more people who comment, more people they have to respond to, and delay is our friend in a project like this.
Elliot, a couple people asked for me to share the addresses again. Can I share that slide one more time so they can screenshot it?
Sure, sure.
Okay.
There is a step you have to take to register for the August 5th public hearing before you will get a link.
Yeah.
So there's a registration step that has to be done. Okay, everybody, thank you very much. I guess we'll call it a night, and we hope to see you on August 5th. Thanks for everyone's help tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.